Let's say you wake up one morning and you have the urge to play Bedwars. So you turn on the computer, log on to Hypixel, and maybe you find that your friends are all offline. Or maybe they don't want to play with you. Or maybe you have no friends. What are you supposed to do? Play hole in the wall? Go outside? A lot of people don't like solo Bedwars, and understandably so. Bedwars clearly wasn't designed for only one player to be on each team. In fact, many people would even rather random queue doubles and play solo. However, this can easily lead to many more problems, such as the fact that you can still get placed on a team by yourself, or your teammate downloaded the game yesterday. So what's wrong with solo Bedwars, you may ask? Well, it's commonly thought that the game can be played very slowly, and it can feel like it can get targeted by 2 or more different teams at once way too often. While I do see slight validity in those complaints, there's ways around that, and I'm here to show you just that. Doubles, 3s, and 4s are much more just go leave your base and let's click people off the map. While there is a bit of game sense required in those modes, solo Bedwars is much different for the fact that it actually requires a lot of thinking. The game kind of plays like chess in a way, and the fact that you have to predict how each player's movement and decisions are going to affect the game and make the best decision for yourself. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, so let's start at the very beginning of the game. I'm going to say this really quickly. If you don't use Forge or any other legal PvP client, you should. You can get frame boosts and mods like block overlay and zoom, which can be really helpful during Bedwars games. This is going to be the last time you're going to hear this from me. If you're not using Lean or a Badline or something like that, once again, you should. Okay, so you're in the lobby, and your game eventually loads in, and now you're at your starting island. You got a wooden sword, naked bed, and a dream. Oh yeah, and a shop along with infinite access to resources. This is when I see players go to mid or diamonds whenever it's away from the nearest base. This is a bad idea. In Bedwars in general, you're going to have to aggro the nearest base, especially if you ever want to spawn at the daily or weekly leaderboards. If you leave your base open to the person you're next to, they're most likely going to go over and destroy your bed. So no matter how bad you think you are at PvP, always try to put up a fight. You can't get better at the game by running around in circles at mid without a bed. If someone comes speed bridging at you with full force, whatever you do, don't disconnect. It doesn't matter how good that player is. Try to beat them. You're not going to do anyone a favor by denying that person to the final. Always try to fight. However, committing to a bed defense is also a bad idea. If you're by yourself and somebody kills you while you're fighting at your base, they're almost always going to be able to get your bed no matter how much resources you put into it unless they encounter obsidian. 5 seconds is actually kind of a long time if they have the proper tools in order to destroy your bed. There are 3 viable solo Bedwars defenses in my opinion: single layer wool, double layer wool, or a wood wool combination. These defenses are pretty cheap and they do the job perfectly fine. Leaving your bed naked isn't smart either, because someone can just destroy your bed in the middle of a fight. All your bed defense has to do is force a fight between you and your opponent. You don't want your opponent snagging your bed in the middle of a battle. You can occasionally catch players off guard if you rush them fast enough. Some maps it's very clear on who to rush, others it isn't. In maps like Airshow, everyone is going to be rushing their diamond island, which means that players are going to be fighting the other team across from their diamonds. In maps like Lotus, it's not as clear as who to rush, which means that you can find yourself in a situation where you're getting rushed by both teams. I went through the trouble to give you all a cheat sheet on what to do at the beginning of each game. Some maps it's abundantly clear on who to rush, other maps it's a little bit more in the air, but there are some cases where you're going to be finding yourself double rushed very frequently. Once again, this list is my opinion. You don't have to look at it. You can make your own choices. Whenever you choose to rush a team, you need to be looking at everything going on in your game to ensure your bed is safe. You can do this by looking at your game chat, scoreboard to the side, or simply just looking around you. You of course want to be able to see the most of the map at any given location, so make sure your render distance is cranked high enough in order for you to do so. If you don't have the greatest computer, make sure to lower your graphics and smooth lighting settings to make sure to stay around that 60 frames per second area. Okay, so maybe the person you rushed was a much better player than you and you die. Unfortunate. Start a new game, rinse and repeat. Let's say you are able to successfully kill the team next to you. Now you need to kind of pay attention to what's going on around you. Alright, hopefully you remember what I said about game sense earlier, because yeah, it's really important. In cases where you destroy one of your neighbor's beds quickly, you don't want to pick fights between 2 players who are already fighting. They're dealing with each other, and you are very unlikely to get targeted until one of the players conquers the other. Because of this, it's a much smarter decision to target the other team if they aren't fighting. But, once again, be paying attention to that side of the map. If one of the players destroys the other player's bed, they could go for you next. I consider pretty much all of the Bed Wars maps to be split into quadrants containing 2 different bases and a diamond island. And once you destroy the other team in your quadrant, you need to set out to kill the other player in another quadrant. There's 2 quadrants evenly spaced from you and one across the map, so you and other players both have options on who to target. In routine games after the early game, there's basically 2 1v1s going around the 4 remaining players. In order to get in this situation, you need to pay attention to what's going on at the other side of the map. If a player across from you looks like they're traveling into a certain quadrant, you should travel to the uninterrupted quadrant. This will create more of an equal situation for everyone now that there are 2 1v1s going on. The best players of each quadrant will then go on to fight each other. If you lose, unfortunate. And once again, start a new game and hopefully you'll find yourself in a similar situation sometime soon where you can win. If you live past the mid game, good job, you've almost made it. Now there's 1 player standing in your way of victory. This is the part of the game that requires the least amount of decision making and the most amount of pure skill. It also helps to have plenty of diamond upgrades and spared resources away for the final fight. Okay, so hopefully you're able to win at this point. Well everyone, thank you for watching. Wait. You mean to say that not every single Bed Wars game looks exactly like what I just described? I never covered on actually how to fight other players? We still got a lot to talk about. So, yeah, not all games are gonna look that way. That's wild, isn't it? What I described above is the ideal Bed Wars game, but no games are gonna look exactly like it. Some games might seem routine apart from a few minor differences, such as, let's say you win your 1v1 quicker than the other side of the map. Then you get to go in, intervene, and maybe you end up pulling that victory with 4 finals. But some games can play completely differently. If you're a new player, the following maps are going to give you a much more consistent Bed Wars experience, and they're great for learning basic game sense and skill. That doesn't mean other maps are bad, that just means you should expect a much more random game if you're going to play other maps. In fact, only playing maps that you're good at is a bad idea. It's important to experience different situations so you can learn how to play under more abnormal conditions. Can other maps play like the one I just described? Of course. Can the maps that I listed just play insanely chaotically sometimes? Definitely. Players can of course disconnect, fall into the void, there's a bunch of randomness can happen. One thing I flat out haven't talked about at all is the existence of finals. It's Bed Wars after all, just because a player's bed gets destroyed doesn't mean that they're dead. Finals can cause problems. You kill the team next to you, while in the quadrant across from you each player trades beds, then they fight each other and one player kills the other one. Now there is one final left on the completely opposite side of the map, which means that that player will most likely stay in his quadrant or go to mid. This is very problematic. Depending on both the map and the remaining players, there's a good chance that the players in your neighboring quadrants will feel unthreatened by the final, as that final isn't bothering anyone by collecting resources. Both players will see you as the imminent threat, and they will both try to get rid of you. This is not cross-teaming by any means. This is what I like to call sandwiching. This term describes what happens when 2 teams decide to target down one team, and in this case, you're the cheese. This case is absolutely devastating to be in, especially as a solo player. You can't leave your base to go hunt down the other team or else your bed will get destroyed. You aren't just in a pickle, you are the pickle. Each team can take their turn going for you while the other player gets stacked on diamonds. You're left with very few options and none of them are very good. You can try to wait up for the final to come and destroy one of the other's beds. This isn't reliable, but the final could fail and die, or fall into the void, leaving you completely helpless. You can try to YOLO one of the red teams, and you just completely throw your bed. This is risky, but if it does work out, you're able to make it to where you defeated that team, and now you're up against a stacked final and one remaining team with a bed. You can now collect resources freely, but if you die, it's game over. The last option I would say involves losing your bed, but this time you're trying to get really stacked. If you notice that mid is looking pretty full, or the final is running around collecting emeralds while they're really under-geared, you can try to go over to mid and obtain a bunch of emeralds one way or the other. You're going to be pretty rich, but this is going to be throwing your bed. And you still have 2 beds you have to destroy and possibly a final. There's not really a right option on how to handle bedlessness. Each situation is going to look a little bit different. If you lose your bed early game, it's best to focus on survival and collecting resources. Destroying other people's beds should come in secondly. You want to wait till there's only a few teams left in order to go in and try to strike. Alright, now onto the more technical aspects of Bed Wars, such as bridging, fighting, and what and when items need to be bought. Knowing how to speed bridge is nice, but it's not required in order to win. If you want to try to learn how to speed bridge, I'd recommend watching a quick YouTube tutorial and then going to a bridging practice server every once in a while. It's a pretty good way to develop speed bridging skills, and there's nothing wrong with practicing bridging even if you are a pretty seasoned speed bridger, and you need to warm up for games. I would discourage speed bridging during real games if you are fairly new to it. You don't want to be falling constantly throughout the entire game. There's nothing wrong with taking it a little bit slower, but with that being said, the ability to speed bridge consistently is a very useful skill. While there are faster bridging methods such as breezing and god bridging, it's not very viable in solo bedwars as those methods are much more prone to falling. And since you're playing solo, you have no teammates behind you in order to help complete the bridge in case you do fall. Bedwars combat usually occurs in 3 situations. The first situation occurs inside a base where you can't place blocks, so the winner of the battle is purely decided on how each player's aim, movement, and how geared that person is. There's nothing I can really tell you on how to get better at this other than just practice by playing the game a lot. It's also good to understand that you typically want to try to take the fight out near the void whenever you do have worse gear and items, so you have a shot at knocking off a more stacked player. The second situation is whenever players are both fighting on the ground, but it's outside where blocks can be placed, and there's usually void not too far away. This can occur at mid, diamonds, or on the outside part of the team's base. I get asked a lot on my streams about my PvP style under this circumstance. I like to place a lot of blocks in combat, and a lot of people wonder why I do it. I've always just kind of said I spam left click, but that's not really true. I don't really feel like explaining it, but I have a script. I have editing. I can do this. Alright, yes, so there actually is a little bit of technique involved. Now, whenever I am breaking someone's bed or after I kill them and they respawn, I put up a quick little wall in front of me. This is because it buys me more time to get to bed, and I can put myself at a better location where I can knock players off if they dare come outside to try to fight me. During these battles, if they don't get knocked off immediately, I like to place blocks that will force players near the ledge where they can then be thrown into the void, or place a block in front of them. This will make whoever I'm fighting immobile, and in Minecraft you're going to take more knockback if you aren't moving. If they aren't near a ledge, I can get a pretty nice combo on them and will quickly drain your remaining health. Placing a block in front of a player can usually break up the combo if you do find yourself getting beat up a bit, and it can then set yourself up for a nice return combo. The last situation is whenever you fight someone on a bridge. You can go forward, you can go backwards, but death awaits you on both the left and right sides. If you have a lot of blocks, I would strongly suggest building up, preferably vertically zigzagging, on a player that you might be face to face with on a bridge. Going straight into the other player would be extremely risky. Even if you are more kitted out than the other player, knockback can quite evidently seem to be random. You certainly should not try to do this if you're bedless. If you take my advice and build up and the other player comes in running anyways, and if you have a little bit of good timing, you can jump on that player and safely knock him into the void. And in general Minecraft PvP, jumping onto a player from high ground will almost always guarantee you the first hit, creating a good scene for you to jump down and bump someone into the void, or start a combo that'll usually end in lethality. Okay, back to the bridge scenario. If the player runs back over to an island with a lot more room, just continue to bridge above the player if you do wish to kill them. As I discussed before, falling into a player from high ground will typically get you to a situation where you can kill them as long as you're not falling from too high. If a player does decide to build up on you as well, which will happen most of the time, you have to remain calm and try to get that high ground. This is when the ability to speed bridge can come in handy. A really fast zigzagger can easily get more height on slower players. If you find yourself being overwhelmed by a player who has much more height and better bridging than you, whatever you do, do not directly be under that player. Do whatever you can to avoid this. You can start zigzagging the other way, try to get the player off, or maybe if it makes sense in your situation, you can jump down and go past the player. You always want to be looking for an opportunity to safely knock your opponent off into the void. This is how you get most of your kills in this fight scenario. It's also best to have your keybind set up where you can quickly and easily switch from your sword to blocks, not just in Bedwars, but anything Minecraft. I have my second slot, which contains my sword, binded to control. Yes, I know, I'm weird. And I have a blocks in my third slot, which has the default hotkey at number 3. It's good to have carefully thought out hotkeys for any slot, especially the later slots where the keys can be really hard to reach by default. Try to rely on the scroll wheel a little less. It's pretty easy for your finger to slip up, and sometimes scrolling across the hotbar takes way too long. Don't forget you're able to customize where each item goes in your hotbar via the shopkeeper. Moving on to items, Bedwars features a wide variety of tools, weapons, and upgrades that are available from the shopkeeper. Make sure to have plenty of blocks before you ever leave your base. Having tools is really good, and a lot of people don't buy shears because it's a bit more expensive and it feels unnecessary because you can mine wool pretty fast by your hands. But shears allow you to mine wool even fast and you can catch a ton of people off guard. Stone swords are pretty good too, and for what it's worth, they're very well priced. Ladders are useful for getting down places without taking fall damage, and other uses I don't feel like getting into this video alone. Ladders are a bit tricky to use, but they're dirt cheap and they can be useful if you are good with them. Fireballs are what you want to buy if you have a lot of iron left over. They can launch people off the map, or they can take you high into the sky. Fireball jumping is useful for getting back onto high ground, an escape tool, or fast mobility. You don't want to waste your iron on golems or silverfish. Players can just run away from these. The ability to launch yourself by hurling towards someone is far superior and cooler. Golden apples are always a useful fast healing method, and they're relatively cheap. TNT isn't as worth it in solo bedwars, as you only need to kill one single player at their base in order to get their bed as long as you have tools. TNT is usually good for exposing a bed while you're single-handedly facing multiple players who are at their bed, ready to defend against you. TNT is a good mobility tool though. It requires tighter timing, but it can take you a bit further than fireballs can, and comparatively less expensive. Although it's not as useful as an offensive self-launching attack tool like fireballs. This is because it takes 4 seconds to explode after being placed, and it allows the opposing player to get ready for it. Iron Armor is always a great investment since it's permanently going to give you a large combat advantage. Both regular and power bows are a bit expensive, but they could be useful to knock players off from a safe distance. But the whole point of this video is to tell you how to win with Bedwars using skill. Your games are going to take a lot longer, and players will always find a good way around a bow camper, and it's solo, it's just not as worth it. If you lose your bed in the early game, I'd recommend spending your gold on Iron Sword rather than Iron Armor. Iron Swords provide almost as much as a PvP advantage as Iron Armor for nearly half the price. The only catch being that Iron Swords are lost upon death. And since you don't have a bed, that doesn't really matter. Iron Swords can kill unwrought leather in like 4 to 5 shots, and if you're able to grab a gapple, you have a pretty good revenge push onto someone who just destroyed your bed. Protection and sharpness are simply going to be your best diamond upgrades, along with a minor fatigue trap. Hits can occasionally be useful for dealing with teams with obsidian. Healing Pool is and Forge is useless if you're going to be traveling around the map taking other people's generators. If you're able to get your hands on 8 emeralds with a bed, there's nothing wrong with putting up a safety layer of obsidian if you're in a good spot to do so. It does take a little bit of time to put on if players, especially when you might get caught in the act, which isn't good. Throughout my 15 hours of gameplay it took to get 100 wins, I had personally never bought obsidian because I would rather just store the emeralds for later in case something goes wrong. Or you can use them on things like diamond armor and potions to assist yourself in taking out of other people's beds. Obsidian's like training wheels. You don't want to have them on for too long, and you can go a lot faster without them. If you don't have a bed, you can always use your emeralds to buy at least 1 ender pearl first thing. These things can always get you out of tough situations and can also be used to attack another person by surprise. I would be careful doing this if you only have 1 pearl because you don't really have an escape tool if you use one on offense. Diamond swords are basically the late game iron swords and how they're powerful, but you don't want to buy one if you do have a bed. Bridge eggs can be somewhat useful as like a budget pearl where you can escape and attack people, except it doesn't do as well as the regular ender pearl does. That's not all the items, that's just the items I typically buy. And remember, these are my suggestions on what to buy. They're your resources. You can do whatever you want with them. Everyone has the right to buy whatever they want without being judged. Except if you buy punch bows and you're absolutely garbage. Alright everybody, we are now at the outro part of the video. Whenever I'm speaking unscripted, my hands like to move in random ways, so I'm sorry about that. There's also going to probably be a lot of jump cuts because I can't stay on one topic. Random thought. There's such thing as an introduction, but there's no such thing as an outroduction. First and foremost, I hope you did enjoy the video, and I hope you do start getting better at Bedwars. If you have any additions to basically my strategies, my tech, whatever, please say so in the comments. This was also an unofficial face reveal. I could have clickbaited a face reveal video beforehand, but I opted not to. So, you're welcome. This video did take me a really long time to make. I was trying to get the video out in 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks I had just finished the script. Alright, so once again, I hope you did enjoy the video. I hope you did learn a lot. I would really like it if you were to subscribe, maybe like the video. If everybody shared it with 1 person, then this video would have 7 billion views, so we're hoping to get to that milestone by around 2 weeks. What you should do is you should just send this video and just say chicken, and what they have to do is say nugget. So if somebody sent you this video with chicken, you have to say nugget. Or else, what will happen is that you get served a bowl of M&Ms and Skittles combined, so enjoy that. Anyway, thank you. That was very passive aggressive. I'm sorry about that.